Well, hello, Faith family, and thanks again for joining us for the Daily Connection. This is the Friday edition, and I know that sounds good to a lot of you. You're also thinking about next week being Thanksgiving with anticipation of getting together, hopefully, with family and friends without the interruptions that we've dealt with for the past couple of years with COVID. And so today we're going to conclude our look at how we can have confidence in failure by looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10, where Paul basically makes a summary statement in verse 10. So I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So this is a culmination statement, if you will, of everything he's been talking about thus far in chapter 12 from, hey, I may not be a super apostle, but let me tell you about an experience or something that somebody told me about. And then lo and behold, he finally admits that he's the one who had the vision. And then he talks about how in order to keep him humble, God gives him the thorn in the flesh, the messenger from Satan, the torment that comes with all. And so now in verse 10, he says, but hey, understand something. I delight in weaknesses. That word "take pleasure" can mean delight. It can even say, "Hey, I'm thrilled about my weaknesses." And so my insults, and he goes through all this. And so, no, Paul doesn't have a wish, a masochistic wish, if you will, that he would his body would experience pain, or that he himself would experience persecution, or all the things that he talks about here in verse 12. That's not what he's saying there. And we know that because of the last phrase, for the sake of Christ. He's thrilled in weakness. Well, why is he thrilled in weakness? Because he's already seen how in his own weakness, the power of God is made clear and evident. In his inability to speak correctly, the power of God is made evident in controlling his tongue. In his inability to handle his emotions right, the power of God is demonstrated in the Holy Spirit taking control of his emotions. All the different areas where weakness has been made clear and evident to Paul, God's power has been made even more clear. And so in one sense, he's kind of taking a jab at the super apostles, saying that, hey, just as you claim that the power of God is seen through your eloquence of speech or through your actions that you say have supernatural origins in them, just as you say that, I'm going to tell you just the opposite. I'm going to tell you that the power of God is made most clear in my life when my weaknesses appear, when insults are hurled at me, when persecution is experienced, and I go through seasons of difficulties. That's when the power of God is seen most clearly. And he knows it's the power of God because he says at the end of that section, for the sake of Christ. So it's not just Paul being weak for the sake of being weak. It's not just Paul being insulted for the sake of being insulted. That's not it at all. He's saying that when I am representing Christ, when I am faithful to proclaim his gospel, when I am faithful to carry out his will for my life, when I am faithful to pursue his purpose, all these different things that can be summed up under the statement for the sake of Christ, Paul says, when I am faithful in that, and I'm weak in that, I'm insufficient in that, the power of God comes through more clearly and can be seen with greater detail. And that's what we should strive for, friends. We should seek to decrease, so that Christ would increase, so that the very character and nature of Christ would be made more evident in our life, so that the very will of God would become more clear, not just to us, but to those around us. And so he ends it by saying this, when I am weak, then I am strong. That sounds so counterintuitive to everything we've been taught. We've been taught to be stronger physically, work out, discipline your body, be stronger mentally, read more, study more, do all these different disciplines to strengthen your mind. Be strong emotionally. Don't show emotion. Hide your feelings. All these different things. And yet Paul is saying right here, whenever I'm at the weakest point that I can be, I'm at the lowest state, I'm at the time of most desperate, the most desperate moment of my life, that's when the strength of God is made more prevalent, more prominent, more powerful in my life. And Paul says, therefore, because of that, I am thrilled with my weaknesses, my insults, my hardships, my persecutions, and my difficulties. And that's the perspective we've got to have, friends. Number one, we have to make certain that when we suffer, we are suffering for the sake of Christ. When we endure persecution, it's for the sake of Christ. When we receive insults, it's for the sake of Christ. Not for our political agendas, not from our personal ideologies, not for man-made traditions. It must be rooted in and centered in the gospel of Jesus the Christ, and also in his ministry of disciple making. That's the only proper place for it to be rooted. And when it's there, then we can be thrilled in our weaknesses. We can be thrilled in all those areas of insults, persecution, hardship. Why? Because the power of God is going to be made known. The power of God is going to manifest, to use an older term, to show up in a prominent and prevalent way. And that's what we should delight in, because it's when we're weak that we're truly strong. Well, I'm looking forward to worshiping with you this Sunday. We'll, of course, focus on a Thanksgiving theme as we anticipate that season of Thanksgiving coming up. But the fact of the matter is, we should always be thankful. Paul praised God for his times of persecution and hardship. He praised God that he'd been counted worthy to suffer for the gospel. And we should always be thankful, not based upon our seasons, but based upon what God is accomplishing in and through us in those seasons. So we're gathering together Sunday for the praise and celebration of Jesus. Make certain when you come, your cup is overflowing, that you bring the outpouring of your own personal daily devotion with him, so that when we come together, we celebrate and we lift up Jesus, we encourage one another, we hold each other accountable, and we delight in who he is and what he's doing. And I look forward to that day. And until we're together, friends, live sent.